Being a dad is one of the most rewarding roles we will ever have in our lives, but also can be one of the most overwhelming, where we find ourselves facing the pressures of juggling the demands of our family, careers, and life. This show will feature industry experts in mental health, social services, and personal development, along with resilient dad role models whose stories of overcoming the challenges of parenting get a new vision for the life you and your kids deserve. I'm your host, Pat DiDomenico, and this is the Resilient Dad Show. Welcome to the Resilient Dad Show. I'm your host, Pat DiDomenico, and today we have the pleasure of having our guest, Carolina Behr. Carolina, welcome to the Resilient Dad Show.
Thank you. Such a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, and I love, what you've created and what you're doing, creating the kids manual community and, with all the experience that you have, over 20 years in the classroom environment, since 2006 as well, being in the, a Montessori directress, and, the thing about helping parents of young children and supporting their development and solve behavior issues without punishment and rewards. I think that's every parent's dream to be able to, give their, children the support they need for their development through life without, punishments, or bribing them with rewards. So I've already learned so much from you from a short period of time that I've got to know you, but, every time that we have a discussion, I learn so much more. So I'm excited about this, our recording today, and as well as I'm sure our guests will get a lot of value. So could you share a bit about yourself and how you got started and the journey to where you are now?
Oh, thank you, Pat. Yes, so I started working with children with special needs. That was my passion originally. And I noticed that children didn't always learn with the techniques and tools I had at that point. So I was super young and very passionate. So I started taking a bunch of classes on parenting and teaching and special needs techniques and things like that at the time. That's what we called. And eventually I struggled through it a lot because I couldn't find something that worked. And eventually I found Montessori. And through Montessori, I found other ways of relating to children and creating a relationship that is more child-centered instead of adult-centered. And when you are able to switch that perspective and go into a child-centered mode, it just changes the way you look at the world. And then your relationship with children changes too. So from that point on, I started having a very successful classroom with minimal disruption, no punishment, no bribes, no complaints. And the parents started really having a hard time believing it was true. They would come to observe because they couldn't believe how smooth things were. So I started sharing with parents what I was doing in the classroom, and they started reporting back that it was working at home. So eventually I had somewhat of an idea of what to suggest to parents to make home life easier. And I started doing that at the beginning of the school year meeting. And the parents would practice those things and report back that it was working and then improve. So at my last year as a teacher, I had a 4 years wait list in my classroom, and children started my classroom at 2 years and a half, 3 years old. So parents were getting on the wait list the moment they decided to have another baby before they were even pregnant, because they were really loving what was happening. And so when COVID came, I left the classroom and parents started calling me and we started exchanging. And eventually I realized that I was holding back on something that could be really useful. And I decided to put out in the world, and here we are now.
It's definitely something that will help many children and essentially their future and the relationships they have with their kids. Because when we become parents, it's not like we've spent 4 years at university or had some extensive educational training on being a parent. So we can definitely go into it not necessarily guided. We get advice from our family and friends, but it doesn't really prepare you for it. I know I went to a prenatal class, with my wife before we had our kids, but that doesn't necessarily help you with the upbringing and through the different stages of life. So, it's definitely much needed, and I'm glad that you're sharing it with the world. So, what were some of the common things that you picked up with kids that they, or reasons why they were behaving in certain ways, and the things that you were able to do to support them.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So
for it to be, positive.
I think there are things that we underestimate to children that once you realize, it changes everything. So, for example, some teachers will have a list of rules, or some parents even a list of rules for the classroom, for the family. These are our family agreements, and they are in depth, and they are long and extensive. And then the children break the rules, and the parents try to reinforce the rules. I understood that you could simplify those. Every rule that has ever existed that make a parent or child or teacher and child relationship successful in 3 rules. You could make 3 basic rules that always work. And they are respect for self, respect for others, respect for the environment. Those rules will cover everything. So if the child is being unsafe, you can tell them this is disrespectful to yourself, to your body. Let's be safe, and let's go back to being respectful to your body. If the child throws something on the floor, that's not respectful to the environment. If the child screams at the dog, that's not respectful to others. So you always bring the child back to this behavior, and it's so simple. The thing that is more fascinating is because it's so simple, the child will give it back to you. You speak to the child in a tone that they don't appreciate, and they tell you, that's not respectful to myself. And they also notice on the parents, and then they start calling out, right? The parents cut the yellow light, and they say, you're not being respectful to the environment. You just cut the light, when you're driving. So it becomes a language that is so efficient, because the children now also have power over those rules. They're not imposed on the children, but they are part of the culture of that environment, be a classroom, be a home. So anytime you make the child part of whatever it is, then you will be more chances of success, because the child now is in your team. They want those rules or those things to be reinforced. Another thing is sometimes we try to impose our will on children for something that is for the child's benefit. So a very simple example that I like to give is, sometimes you're in a hurry, you have to go to work or to school, take the child to school, for instance, and you say, put your shoes on. You need to put your shoes on because we have to get to school. And the child says, no, I'm not putting my shoes on. And instead, perhaps you can say, oh, it's time to go to school. Would you like to put your shoes on or to carry them? The child just makes a really quick choice. I'll carry them. And then you put the child in the car and you go to school. Or you can say to the child, if it's something that the child is excited about, like they want to go to the playground, you can say, as soon as your shoes are on, we're on our way to the playground. And then you sit back and relax, because the child now is in a hurry, because as soon as the shoes are on, they're going to the playground. So it's no longer about you, it's about the child. So little shifts like that, when you put the power in the child's hands, but it's not really, it's just language, right? You give language that allows the child to feel empowered and in a process with you and not against you. It's no longer a power struggle. Therefore, they will do it. So in the classroom, that's everything. Because instead of telling them, now it's time to, I just changed the sentence to, as soon as this, then that. And there's no bribe, there's no punishment. It's just a sequence of events.
And if the child, for whatever reason, decides to not put their shoes on, or they're not necessarily making the decisions that would help them achieve the outcome that they're after, could you explain a bit more? You've mentioned briefly, on previous discussions that we've had about doing as less as possible for them, and then doing even less. So how does that, in terms of help supporting the kids?
Absolutely. So, for example, in the example about going to the park, right? When you say, as soon as your shoes are on, we're going to the park. Let's say they don't put their shoes on. You can look at your clock and you can say, let me show you right now, this arm of the clock is in this place and it's 3:15. And I have until 3:30. So we can say this time inside, and I'll sit here. I'm going to read this book, and you can choose if you're going to just wait or if you want to put your shoes on and go. And that's okay. Whatever you choose, I'm with you, because this is your time. You can use your time on the playground, or you can use your time here in the house waiting. And I'm okay with either way. So now the child makes a choice. They can even tell you, actually, I want to stay home. And that's really okay if you are being truthful to your child, right? Now, the opposite, when it gets complicated, is when you have to get somewhere. So you have to get to school. They have to go to school, right? And you have a time frame and you need to be on time because otherwise you're going to catch traffic or you're going to be late. Then you can say, I will give you 5 minutes to decide if you want to put your shoes on or if you want to put them in your backpack and take them with you. But if you don't make a decision, then I will have to make a decision for you because in 5 minutes we will leave the house. So you can make your choice or I will take you and I'll put you in the car, but I don't want to do that. I want you to take your own body to the car. But if in 5 minutes you still haven't made a choice, I will help you and I'll make that choice for you. And we're going to get to school on time. And then you just keep your word. And when you come to pick them up, sometimes kids just start crying. And instead of saying, I told you so, you say, I know. It's so sad when we don't make a choice and someone else makes the choice for us. It's actually really hard. And you just love on them because for them, it's actually really serious and it's really hard. And guess what happens? The next time you give them a choice, they take the choice because now they know that you're not the enemy. You're not going to force on them, that you're going to love them through it, but you are honestly giving them a choice. And if they choose not to take it, you will make a choice for them, but it's going to be out of love and not out of power. You're not going to overpower them and say, yes, I told you you're going to get in the car. Instead, you say, you couldn't make a choice. I'll choose for you. And it's that type of language really brings the child closer to you because now you're their ally. And that's what you want.
Yeah. Hearing that it's not being the dictator or the punisher. Yeah. It's more being the supporter or guide and letting him understand there's consequences for all actions. And probably a big part of that is also that the parents are consistent as well. And that the focus is not necessarily on me as a parent and what I need to do, but what can I do best to support my child through this? And, for me, having 3 young boys, 6, nearly 4 and 1.5, patience has probably been the biggest thing that's been tested. But does that help also the parents with being more calm and relaxed and in their parenting?
I believe so, because if you are giving your child choice and if you're keeping yourself in a good, peaceful state, because if you are agitated, your child will respond to this, right? Like children will respond to the energy you put out. I mean, those mirror neurons will fire and they're going to do exactly what you're doing. So if you're agitated, they go agitated. But if you can go into this state that I like to call brainless. So for instance, you're going to lose your patience. Instead of using this huge vocabulary you have, find a sentence that helps you keep your cool. Something I use is, oh, bummer. So the child decides now that not only they're not going to put their shoes on, they're going to take off their clothes and throw themselves in the foyer and scream, right? And it happens because they just lose concentration. They just can't choose anymore. They lose their patience. They start crying. And the desire the adults might have would be to overpower the child and to get your will done. And that might work today, but it's not going to work when they're 16. And you're not working for today. You're working for a lifelong relationship. So instead, you can go brainless and you can say, oh, bummer. Oh, bummer. And you can start describing to the child, oh, there goes your shirt. Oh, bummer. The floor is cold. Yeah. Oh, no. There goes your pants, too. Oh, you look very upset. Oh, bummer. Now you are so sad. I can see. And as the child continues, they lose interest because now instead of saying, what they should do or shouldn't do, you're describing to them the scene and they stop and they look at you shocked. They're like, what's happening? Like all of a sudden you have the power again. And then you say, are you upset? Would you like a hug? And they usually come running to your arms and they start crying and they're so upset and they don't even know why. And you can help them. Did you got frustrated? Did you got angry? Were you just unsure? You didn't know how to put your shoes on? You can give them lots of questions and they will say yes or no or I don't know. But you're showing them how to regulate their emotions by regulating yours. Now, if you were to get upset and say, stop this right now. No, nobody's going to the playground and we are done. You lose your child's interest. You lose your patience. Nobody wins. There's no learning. So just find yourself a little brainless sentence that you can use when you get frustrated and you start using that same sentence. And you know what's really funny? At some point, one of your boys is going to notice that it's a pattern and you're going to say, oh, bummer. And they're going to freeze and look at you. And it's so cool when that happens because they stop and they look at you and they immediately start self-regulating because they know that what's coming
Yeah.
next is loving and supportive and they can count on. So instead of going into a full tantrum, they stop and they come to you because now they get associating they start associating that sentence you use all the time with comfort. So they're
Yeah.
about to lose their temper, but instead they connect. And that connection is what really we're going for, right? So the child can use their whole brain and be present.
Correct. It's being able to regulate, to regulate their emotions, which I think probably a lot of us adults could do with that lesson as well.
Absolutely.
But how have you found it through the younger children that start this process, and then once they get to young children to 6 to 9 to young teenagers, how have you found the difference from the children that have been able to experience this journey compared to other children that don't necessarily have this support?
I have, and it's quite amazing. There's twofold, right? The part that we don't expect is that these kids are able to negotiate in a much higher level, not only with parents, but with teachers, with any figure of authority, which is a very interesting skill to have. So I just recently was visiting a school to do an observation, and the teacher of this sixth graders gave them a new planner. And the child was transcribing from her original planner to the new planner. And then the director came to the classroom with me to do a walkthrough and asked, how is it going? And she's like, actually, I'm not satisfied because I feel like I could be using this work time more productively. I'm just transcribing. And then the director say, wonderful, let's set an appointment. Let's discuss the new planner. And I immediately say, can I please be there? And she's like, yes. And we went into a whole meeting with this 3 9-year-olds and 1 11-year-old who brought it all up, that they all want to talk about the new planner and how they figure it was not efficient for their time. And these are kids that are able to discuss in such a high level. Like when I was that age, I would never talk to the director about anything, much less about questioning my teacher's choices. And they weren't scared. They were not talking their teachers back. The teacher was right there. They were just fine. They were just negotiating what they need. So children become more self-aware of their needs. And they also call out on the parents. So they will say things like, you look frustrated. What's happening to you today? And then they start creating this relationship that is so real, right? Because now they can talk with you in real terms. You give them vocabulary when they're little and they use for the rest of their lives. And they will say back to you, oh, bummer, you look like you're getting upset. So it's really rich and it's a lot of work because now you're dealing with someone that has critical sense, right? Not someone that obeys simply. Something that is important to parents to understand is that a child that obeys their parents also obeys teachers, also obeys other adults that are not necessarily good people or the best influence in your child's life. A child that cooperates with their parents chooses to cooperate or not with the other adults because now they're not scared. They're learning to have a relationship, to have a dialogue, right? So if your child learns so young to use language to stand for themselves and say, yes, I am upset. And if that's okay, if there is a space in your house to be upset, then they learn to put their feelings first anywhere they are. And that's huge for a child. That's a protection device.
It is. It was definitely not an environment that was set up for me as a child, but I can think of had I been more confident in being able to communicate what I was thinking, or not necessarily, as I say, the patterns of people pleasing, that definitely could have avoided a lot of future situations in terms of even just relationships with other people, and not understanding that the only reason that this occurred is because I accepted it and I didn't give the other person the opportunity to understand what I was thinking or feeling. And could you share what are some of the other consequences that of the kids that don't necessarily have that support?
There is an author I like very much, Alfie Kohn, and in one of his books, he talks about these parents that come to him and say, I don't understand. This child was so easy. They always wore what I told them. They did what I told them. And now they only follow the friends at school. They only eat what the friends eat. They only drink what the friends drink. They want to wear what the friends wear. And then Alfie answers, they still the same child. He just changed leadership, right? So if you want a child
Right.
who knows who they are, you answer that question in the home structure, right? The home environment is what answers the question who you are, what you like, what you are like.
Mm.
And you show yourself to your child so your child can learn what an adult looks like. But in order for you to be a full
Mm.
adult in your home, you have to let the child be the child 100%. So when the child loses control, you
Mm.
keep control. When the child loses their temper, you keep your temper. In this way, the child learns to level to you. Sometimes you will see an adult with a child where the adult is throwing a tantrum higher than the child because they're louder and stronger. So they pick the child up and they get really angry. And that's just a tantrum. But then you see another adult that would just be
Mm.
able to keep their cool and say, wow, that looks out of hand. Let's take a break. And that regulates that child, right? So then you get in the classroom, and I'm going to use the classroom
Mm.
just because that is the environment, but you get anywhere, and you
Yeah.
meet these kids that tell you the truth, like who did this? I did. And then you meet those kids that hide from you all the time. And then we know that the kids that are hiding, we can recognize in the classroom, those parents are punishing those kids for everything they do wrong. So these kids become masters in
Mm.
hiding, pretending, not letting the adults know what's happening. And that's not safe. Now, the kids that are used to
No.
admitting because they have consequences, the parents will talk with them, maybe they won't be approved, but it's like they're not scared of their parents. Then they're not scared of the teachers either. When we ask who did this, they say, I did it. I'm sorry, I messed up. And they're so transparent about it. And it's amazing because then you can change, right? Whatever the situation is, you can transform. You can work with these children, with these families. Now, a child that is always being
Mm.
punished or always getting in trouble or always being controlled, this child grows up to be a master at disguising, pretending, not showing, or hiding from the parents. And when they're teenagers or when they're a little older, they will find other children to confide in before they find parents to confide in. And then the consequences can be very catastrophic because think of a 16-year-old who just got caught by the cops, and instead of coming to tell mom and dad, they go to a friend's house and they're scared and they're not really
Mm.
wise. And then their friends are the same age and they're going to try to give each other advice. Now, the same child gets caught by the
Yeah.
cops speeding and calls dad and say, Dad, I messed up. Come get me. And dad comes, and now he can take care of this child and really show them what real life is like. Oh, there's going to be consequences. You're going to have to pay the ticket. You're going to have to do driving school, whatever the consequences are. But now this child, the
Yeah.
parent is holding the child together and saying, but I'm here with you. I'm so sorry I have to go through this. I'm with you still. Little upset. That's upsetting. And I'm still with you. This child has a much easier time navigating life's challenges because they know they can count on somebody all the time. Where the child who learned to hide
Mm.
from the parents from a very young age, sometimes they're 3 and they're already hiding. They're already hiding the mistakes they made. They're already pretending they didn't do it. By the time they're 16, there's no way the child's going to come clean. They're going to make an excuse. They're going to make a story because they're scared. They don't have a partner in their
Yeah.
parents. They have somebody that is in charge. And that's different, right? It doesn't feel very comfortable for the child.
The child's avoiding the pain more than actual the pleasure of being able to open up to the parent, and I guess it's also teaching them accountability, which is a great skill to have for them to be leaders, in the future,
Mm-hmm.
and not necessarily pointing fingers and so forth, and not taking ownership. So you mentioned, like, in terms of setting up the environment for them to be able to, learn themselves, and not necessarily you being the dictator and doing everything for them and not giving them the ability to grow. What are some of the things that we can do to support our kids from a young age, from young toddlers, whether it's like 2 to 3, like I mentioned before, or as they enter school and teenage years?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when parents are pregnant, right, they're waiting for their first baby. Somebody comes in and makes a beautiful nursery where the pictures are at the parent's eye level, where the mobile is ugly from the bottom and the crib is really high and it feels like a
Yeah.
jail. And then you put a baby there who is really craving safety and human contact. And when the baby look up, all he sees is the bottom of the little hanging things on top of the crib. And all they see is white walls and the gates around them, right? Let's pretend this parent take this out and put this child on the floor and lower all those pictures and images to the child's eye level, which is very, very low to the ground. And let's pretend this parent now spends time on the floor with this child. The child all of a sudden has more freedom of movement than they had before. Because when they wake up and they are about 6 months old and they can roll out of their crib and start moving, they actually are right there on the floor. They just learn a little bit of consequence. If they roll out of their mat, this much consequence, right? Like just a little bit, like 20 centimeters of consequence, not much. They fall and they feel and they notice. They might whine a little, but they're not hurt. And the next time they can anticipate, oh, there's a step here down. I'm going to move. Now, from the parent's perspective, this is way more work. Instead of trapping your child on the crib, now you have to bend down to pick up your child. You have to be on the floor with them. You have to keep the floor more clean. There's things that will come and the child's going to put everything in their mouth. But if you think about this brain developing in this child, instead of seeing like 30 centimeters in each direction from the crib, they now see the entire room. They know where the door is. They can anticipate when parents are coming in. They know where the window is. They can see the sun changing and the light outside. They start having way more perspective. When the child starts crawling, they learn how to get out of the room and find mom and dad. That's huge. For a mammal, every animal on our mammal family can find their mom and dad, right? So now our little humans also, once they're crawling, they come and find us. And then the child is growing. So now you start preparing the entire house. So what before was just a bedroom that you prepare for this child, now you start preparing the living room. Things that are lower, instead of making the house child safe, you create a house for the child. So instead of protecting the corners, you show your child where the corners are. Because if you protect the corners in your house, but you don't protect the corners at grandma's or auntie's or neighbor's house, the child will get hurt. But if you don't protect the corners in your house, but you show them where the corners are, they recognize corners in your house, grandma's house, aunt's house, neighbor's house. So now they become aware of corners. They become aware of steps. And then you make the environment as safe as possible without restricting the child. So instead of not letting them use the table to stand up, it just makes sure the table is heavy enough that it's not going to flip on them. And it just starts adding elements that are comfortable for them so they can develop this independence, right? Once they start walking around, you can start working with a little bit of dress up. You put the socks only on their toes. You can do that with your 1.5-year-old. You put the socks on their toes and they can pull. And it's really hard in the beginning. And maybe pull a little more close to the heel and then they can finish pulling. When they finish, you say, you put your socks on. Wow, look at you. You can put your socks on all by yourself. And before you know, the child starts creating pleasure in doing things by themselves. They start drying themselves or in the shower. You put a little soap in their hands, like you wash your body. This is your body. And every time you have an opportunity, you do a little less for this child and you let the child take a little more ownership of their body, their temperature, their hunger, their potty needs. A child that can walk can start getting potty trained. It's a crazy concept. But it's real. If a child can walk from A to B, a child can walk from A to potty. If a child can walk to the potty, they can sit on the potty. A little one, of course. And if they can sit on the potty, then they can be potty trained, right? And if you wait until they're 3, it might be harder. But if you do at this age where it's so exciting to move, it might be easier. So you start doing things in your house that are made for the child. So now, instead of the child being a little guest in your house that have to grow in order to enjoy the environment, your house is the house of the child. And everything in your house is for this child. So you have tables that are their size. You have places for their clothing and places for their shoes. And they can be as mobile as they can. And the more mobility they have, the more advantages they have, the more freedom they get. And with freedom, it comes a really good dose of discipline, because a child that can put their shoes on also learns how to put their shoes on, and it's one last thing that you have to do. So anything you do...
So there's a benefit for the parent.
Yeah, so everything you do that develops independence takes away work from you and gives you free time. Every time. So if you can develop a sleep routine that gives the child independence to go to sleep, now you have free time. If you can create a snack routine where the child can go into the kitchen, find their own snacks and eat without help, you have free time. So always think, where can I add more freedom and more for me and more independence for this child? And you're start gonna seeing it, you're gonna start seeing it everywhere. Because there are opportunities throughout your day that will allow the child to become more independent and that will give you more time. It's addicting.
Correct. Yeah. Well, I can think it even like as a business owner, until you're able to create and support new team members to be able to be sufficient by themselves, you pretty much have to wear that hat. And then eventually, once you're able to have someone take that role on a team member, and then you're able to then have more time, and then from there, you're able to create more and do more. So I'm just thinking it from that perspective as well. So it's investing that initial time to have the rewards of, one, being more free yourself, but then two, also giving them support to have, better upbringings, for the future. And so with the older kids that not necessarily they haven't, so, for instance, if I had a child that was 10 and they haven't been through this system, have there been many children that you've supported in that way that have already have habits that have created, but at that age, there's a way to show them and create new patterns. Can you share a bit more about the kids that haven't been, through the system from a young age?
Yes. So it's surprising to think, but I promise it's true. It's easier for that child to adjust than to the parents of that child to adjust. Because this parent has spent the last 10 years telling the child what to do, what not to do, where to go, how to breathe, how to move, what to wear. So the child adjusts really fast because that child is craving freedom. Human beings crave freedom. We may get it wrong, but we'll get it, right? We might get it by some weird way, but we will get it eventually. So this child is craving freedom. The problem is it will be an exercise for the parent to learn to trust this child, because the parent has no practice. So if you learn with your 1.5-year-old that you can trust them to just get out of their room and find you, and then you learn with your 2.5-year-old that you can trust them to get a snack and eat and put the container away, and then you learn with your 5-year-old that you can actually trust them to be gentle to the other children in the house and to put their own clothes in the hamper when they're done, or to even make their bed, then you can trust your 11-year-old to do their homework without a reminder. You can trust your 11-year-old to do their house chores, not because they're chores, but because this is a community. We live together, we support one another. Now, if you don't have practice and all of a sudden you have a 10-year-old and you decide now, the hardest part is to change the mentality of the parent and to teach that parent to trust that child, because the parent is still looking at a 10-year-old as if they were 5 sometimes. And that's the shift that is the hardest. For the child, is actually quite delightful, because the moment you start explaining to them that now they get to be free, at first they're going to abuse a little bit. But eventually it loses its fun because you keep a strong standard and you don't get upset, you don't get emotionally involved when they're abusing. They go back and they normalize, right? They just go into this place of like, wow, I'm free, I can do things. And it's actually very rich for them and very powerful. For the parents, then we go into a healing, because now sometimes the parents will have questions about their own parenting because they haven't done things this way. And sometimes we just have that little bit of need that we were right before, right? So we want to continue things because changing now might be painful. You might have to consider that you did things in a different way that was not the best possible way before. So if we can ingest a strong dose of healing and forgiveness and self-acceptance of what it is, not what it could have been, what is, then this parent can change and show up different. The child will have a much easier time. It is always easier for the child than it is for the adult.
Yeah. And with the adults, it being harder for them at that age, is it also their own childhood that could potentially, because created their parenting is being influenced by either their parents or other parents that they've seen. Is that a contributing factor as well for them struggling to be able to adapt to that style?
I believe so. I believe each one of us carry a type of wound that is from the way we were raised and also from what we witnessed. And I think parenting is this very unique opportunity you have to heal that wound by making choices that are not about you and about what you desire, but about your child and what's best for your child. Your child, your sweet children, your boys, your kids are what you love the most in the world. There is nothing you love more. And sometimes loving someone that much is overwhelming. And then you want to make sure you're making the right choice. And sometimes it's tempting to fall back into, oh, they did this to me and I'm okay, so I'm just going to continue. I turn out fine, so it's not that bad. Sometimes that's comforting because it's familiar, right? And it's a little harder to do something so different that you have no previous track record. You haven't seen it done before. But if you can walk this line of changing things and creating an environment that is supportive for your children, and you can start to see that in one of your children, that shift, then it reinforces in you and you can do it to others. So I believe it is a process of healing, of remembering, and also of forgiving what was done to you. Because I truly believe this. I've never met a parent who was not doing the best they could. Every parent I ever met was doing the best they could. Starting with my parents, who had a really hard time. And they were doing the best they could.
Yeah.
And we want what's best for our children. We just don't always have the tools, like you mentioned before. There are no classes. There's no training. You work trial by fire, right? You come in and they are screaming and you have to deal with it. So I believe parenting is the most beautiful opportunity for healing there is. And if we take advantage of it, then our children, they're definitely going to have things they'll have to heal from. But at least it won't be old news. At least it won't be the same things we are healing from.
And just thinking about my own childhood, so my father was very strong on discipline and using physical discipline as a way of serving that. But for me, it was like, well, I'll never hit my kids. But then I found myself losing my patience, and whether it's yelling or telling him off. And then I found that, as you're mentioning, like they'll try and be sneaky or try to not necessarily tell the truth if they can get away with it to avoid that punishment. And then I found that when I'd actually dropped my son's level, for instance, my 3-year-old, and just spoke to him instead of, dictating and just asking him questions and asking, why do you think this happened? Or why do you think, Mummy got upset? Or do you think that was nice? I actually got a better outcome from him than me, dictating and yelling or screaming and thinking that was going to get him to see, the things that he was doing. So if you're in a situation where, like myself initially, my son's mother and we weren't together when our son came into the world. But you really want to support your kid in this fashion because you can see the benefits, but you're not necessarily both, parents don't agree on that type of parenting. Is it still possible to be able to support your child in that way, even if they're not getting it from both environments?
Yes. So 2 things, right? Children are extremely adaptable. So I've had kids in my classroom that in the classroom, they're perfect angels. And then the moms are like, who is this child? But it's because at home, the environment was completely different. So they responded to it. But then they came to school and you could see their body relax, right? And they just went into this very peaceful mode. Yeah. So if you think from the side of the child, 50% of a good thing is better than 0, right? So the child will benefit from that environment. Now, there are options. So for instance, the way we set up our programs is so parents can have their own logins, but they don't need to be in the same family. They can both benefit, and
Right.
we extend our program for the parents, the new parents, that the other parents that married the original parents, and the grandparents in both sides, and the nanny, so everybody can get the same language. And usually, even
Mm,
parents that do not have the most amicable divorces, they will be able to cooperate on that because now it's about the child. And both parents have one thing in common: they both
mm,
love the child. It looks different. One
mm,
parent indulges, the other parent gives limits. They each do what they know best. But the one thing that is true
mm,
is that both parents love this child. So by finding that common ground and maybe finding someone that can support both parents to just have the same language, that can be very supportive for the
mm,
child. In two houses will never look the same, but if the rules are similar,
mm,
if you have, you know,
mm,
expectations that are similar, the child will benefit from. Now, if you only one parent is doing,
mm.
it is better than none, right? And I think it's
Correct.
important to create a level of respect too, that at least one parent is never talking about the other. Ideally, no parents would talk about each other. But if we can have at least one
Yeah.
parent that is modeling appropriate behavior, this child will benefit from that.
Mm. Yeah. That's yeah. It's definitely, it's like, I guess anything, it's better to do something better than not doing anything at all. So yeah, that's a good way of yeah, I guess showing people examples of that. It doesn't necessarily have to be either be 100% or not. If you can only control what you can control, so you just do your best regardless
Yes.
of other people's actions or reactions and so forth. I love what you're doing, and I can even see that this would be beneficial for uh, future parents or people that know they're going to be parents to start seeing things that they can do, like you're saying, setting up the environment for their kids, or whether it be in terms of just having that sort of maybe strategy or plan on, okay, this is on the different age brackets. This is how we can best support our kids. How many different age brackets are there, would you
I
say?
work with three different. So I work from birth to three. I work with parents that are also
Mm-hmm.
parents that are not giving birth yet, to parents that are pregnant. But the three groups I have are birth to three, then 3 to 6, and 6 to 9. But there's also 9 to 12, 12 to 15. I'm now working with those groups right now because I want to work with families that are on the making and just starting, right? So parents that I work with right now, they have usually a
Yeah,
3-year old and a 7-year old, or a baby and a 2-year old, and children in those ages. So I'm trying to support the entire family.
yeah,
The needs kids have at those
yeah,
ages are different, but they can be grouped that way. So a baby and a toddler have needs in terms of freedom and space setup and those things that are similar. And then a child between 3 and 6 have needs that are similar, and then 6 to 9 also.
mm,
So those are the three tracks that I work with. But you can keep going, of course, as the child grows. Yes.
yeah. Where can people connect with you? You mentioned before, the kids manual community that you've created. What are the type of services and things that you do to support parents and their kids?
Thank you, Pat. Well, my website is carolinabehr.com. We have a kids manual, is the name of our community inside Mighty Network. In this community, we have free resources. I always give any parent 30 minutes for free. So any parent that want to reach out to me for 30 minutes, I'll always give them a 30-minute talk. And then you can sign up for the free content on the community, or you can sign up for one of the paid content groups. And the groups are birth to 3, 3 to 6, 6 to 9. And then within those groups, we do 2 meetings a week. One meeting is content, where I tell parents what are the needs of the child at that age, how they're developing, what we're looking for, what are the patterns we're trying to recognize, what the child is going through. And then the following meeting is a troubleshooting meeting, where the parents will bring the things they try or didn't try, or the things they're curious about. And then we find solutions that are specific to that child and that family. So we meet twice a week, and we have memberships that parents can sign up for. In our first 2 weeks, it's always free, so parents can see if it works for them.
Yeah, I couldn't see, honestly, a better way to invest your time. I'm definitely going to be joining myself, and I'm sure my wife, she'll be delighted that we were able to find ways to help support our boys without having to bribe them or be the punishers. So, yeah, I want to thank you very much for everything that you shared today, and and what you're doing to support the the kids of the future. So guys, please definitely reach out to Carolina and join our community, because it's not only about you guys being better parents, but also in terms of supporting your kids and essentially creating a better future for the world. So, Carolina, thank you very much again for your time, and I look forward to joining one of your classes.
Thank you, Pat. I so appreciate you. Thank you very much. I look forward to hanging out again.
Yeah, definitely. So, guys, I hope you got a lot of value from today, and I look forward to seeing you guys on the next episode. Take care. Hey everyone, I really appreciate you listening to today's show. It means a lot to me that you are part of the journey and mission to help fathers be the best dads possible. I'd really appreciate it if you review the show and share it with someone you genuinely believe could benefit from this content. Please visit resilientdad.com for more content and resources as we build this community for dads everywhere.